I'm Peter Marks. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. And here's just a little bit about who I am and what I do and why I'm here, and then I'll let some of the folks who are going to chime in introduce themselves as well. We run one market. It's called the Asheville City Market. That's our first year poster from 2008. And then we also staff a market association of about 15 markets called the Mountain Tailgate Market Association. So we provide some shared support for those 15 markets. They collaborate on promotions and marketing. This sign over here, for example, at our office, we'll print 40 of these at a time, and then we'll sell them to those markets for half our cost, just as a centralized service. This is a little refrigerator or filing cabinet magnet with those 15 or 16 markets in 6 counties, and some of the markets are rural and some are urban. So some of my experiences in working together with all of those different markets to help them share best practices, gather their promotional energy, and maybe take out one ad in the newspaper listing all of them rather than everybody spending their own money to promote themselves. So that's a little bit of my experience. And then a little broader than that, our office, Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, or ASAP, also runs what we call a local food and farm campaign. And so we produce this local food guide, and there's about 50 markets in here. If you didn't get one, come pick one up between breaks. That we help promote a little bit. We also have a cost share program where when we can get some grant funding, we'll help them pay for their own promotions, printing rack cards, placing ads, creating radio spots, that sort of thing. We'll usually not pay more than half, but we're trying to encourage markets throughout our region to take some promotional steps, so we do that as well. And then we do trainings like these with markets to help them get started. And so that's a little bit of my background, and my co-presenter this morning is Bernadine Prince. And Bernie, I'll just let you introduce yourself to the group.
Well, good morning. It's nice to see everybody here. I'm Bernadine Prince. I'm one of the founders and co-directors of FreshFarm Markets. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we're set up as a 501c3 nonprofit. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. We started with one farmer's market in 1997, and we now operate 9. We're looking at 2 new sites for this year, so I'm expecting we'll have 10 or 11 markets that we do. All what we consider producer only. Our region is the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and we have farmers from Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia in our market. Unfortunately, nobody's farming in Washington, D.C. But we'll talk a little bit about my programs later, but I'm pleased to be part of this panel and look forward to interaction with all of you today.
And maybe you can hold that mic, and I'll work on this one. And I'll probably point to Mike McCreary somewhat, who I'll just, if you don't mind, give the brief introduction. Mike has a session later. And the reason I'll point to Mike is he actually manages the market that I sort of led or staffed a 3-year-long farmer-led process to start our market from about 2005 to 2008. And Mike is the market manager who came in at the end of 2007. Do I have that right, Mike? To help run the market. So that's who's here. We're going to try to cover a lot of ground. This first session is what we call foundations. So it's whether you have an existing market, here are some things that maybe you want to get squared away and figured out and clear as you go forward. If you have a brand new market, we're going to try to cover some of the issues about how is it structured, who runs it, who's the board, how is it formed legally, what are the rules and regulations. We're going to spend a lot of time on sort of key points in those areas. And so hopefully that'll be helpful. And as Stacy said, feel free to jump in with questions, but make sure you get a mic in front of you if you do, because this is all being recorded. And so they want to make sure that your questions end up on the recording as well. So here's our first key question. Who forms the market? And the little text that I put on here is, yes, partnerships are important, but you want to clearly and early on define whose process it is. Because you don't want to end up with a power struggle. And I have this slide here. This is back in about 2005, and This is me out in the field. This is looking at sites. This is a director of a certain community development organization for the River District in Asheville telling us about possible sites down there, and I'm there with a group of farmers. And it was clear all along to us that this was the farmer's process. So I had a guiding group of 10 farmers who I worked with for 3 years to launch the market. I was staffing that process, but when I disagreed with key decisions, I felt it was their decision because it was a farmer group starting the market. It wasn't clear what the organization was going to be yet, whose umbrella it was going to be under, how it was going to run, but we still made it clear whose market is this. It's the farmer's market in our case. Now, I'm not saying that's always the right answer. My advice to you is that's just one thing that you should make crystal clear early on. Whose market is it? Okay. Bernie, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, we would do the same thing, scouting for market sites, but basically we recruit the farmers, we find the sites, we get all the data, we collect all that, and the farmers are absolutely key to our success as a market. But as far as overall site location, it's not something the farmers, especially in our area, would have time to be able to do. Mm-hmm. There is a market in Tacoma Park, Maryland, and that market is over 35 years old, and it is farmer run. And it was started by the farmers in downtown Tacoma Park, and it runs pretty well. The board is all farmers, and it gets to be a little protective sometimes with people saying, well, I've got cheese, so I don't want anybody else coming in with cheese because, so you have to, I think if you serve on a board, you have to be a little bit broader minded than just looking at protecting your own kind of turf. You need to look out for the broader market constituency, but, it can go both ways. There are a number of markets that run very successfully with the farmers in charge.
And we're going to talk more about that later, about who actually controls those decisions. The next question we have up here is, what's the market's purpose and mission? There are a lot of different reasons for starting markets. And I'd ask you to look at this list and think about your market or the one you're starting. And I'm going to say, pick no more than 2 in your mind right now. I just want to do this as a fun exercise and to get your brains working, that are the most important reasons why your market exists. Okay, the Jeopardy music is now playing in our heads. All right, somebody tell me what they chose and why. Hold on.
Hi, I chose economic development and food access. We're in the northeast corner of Tennessee, and we actually have more bear than we have people.
Our market is for farm preservation, farm marketing opportunity because there wasn't a market close where we are, and education because we want to educate the public of what's local and how to use it.
And our market is closely tied to the mission of the parent organization that started it, ASAP, and therefore I'd say that that bottom point, that second one, farm preservation and farm marketing opportunity, is the key one for us. And knowing that helps make things clearer and drive some of the decisions that we make on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. How the rules are, how many craft vendors we'll let there be versus farm vendors. A lot of this is driven by our sense of what's important, which is really what a mission is about. This is a little different, simpler exercise than writing a mission statement, but I'd encourage you to sit down with an exercise like this for your market to say what's important to us. Now, not that these other things can't be important. A lot of these other things happen whether you want them to or not. You're helping revitalize neighborhoods. You're helping support the arts. You're providing food access. You're providing something for tourism promoters to talk about. That's regardless, but there's also the key core reasons why you exist. I'm going to hand it over to Bernie. Anything you want to add about mission and why that's important in creating mission?
Oh, it's very important. The reason we started FreshFarm Markets is because we saw that farmers were not surviving economically in our region, and we absolutely wanted to make sure that there was a future of farmland in our area. So that economic development, making sure that farmland is kept in agriculture is key, and educating the customer every single day. Because frankly, the farmers, they have enough to do with growing the product, getting it to market, selling it, and making sure that they're being successful on the farm. So I see that the market management is really important to educating the customer every single day.
I wanted to put those other slides before we talked about partnerships, because I think you do need a strong core, and then you go out and find who can help with that core, who can help make this happen. So who are each of these partners, Bernie, and what do they do?
We have a lot of partnerships with our markets because you can't do it in isolation, especially in a place like Washington, D.C. DC Central Kitchen is a partner that actually does our gleaning program. At the end of every market, we partner with a nonprofit organization that picks up fresh food from the market and use it in their charitable organization. So DC Central Kitchen does meals program for the homeless in DC, but they also do a food training program so that these low-income homeless people learn how to do food service activities and can get employed in the community. And the market turns out to be one of the only sources of fresh, raw food that they can use. So we are a very important part of what they do. Last year, we donated over 27,000 pounds of food to that organization. They're coming to the market on a weekly basis.
We have an organization called the Society of St. Andrews that also exists in some other places, and they also send volunteers around during the last half hour of market day and pick up food, and they're able to give the farmers a receipt too, saying what was taken, which provides potentially a tax benefit for them.
Yeah. Actually, none of our farmers have ever wanted that tax benefit, but they are very generous with the food. Some farmers actually set aside food that they've got extra, potatoes, tomatoes, whatever, that they know that they won't be able to sell, and bring them to the market because they know the food's being used for a worthwhile purpose. The Downtown Business Improvement District is right down in Washington, D.C. They were actually one of the first bids that were started in the country. And what it is, they tax the local businesses on the square footage that they take up, and then use that money to do promotions for the businesses, for the community. So they're downtown in the Penn Quarter neighborhood, which is between National Archives and the Portrait Gallery. It is what is now considered Restaurant Alley. The Verizon Center is there. It's a part of the city that, when we started markets in '97, in fact, the bid came to us in '98 and said, we want a farmer's market down here on a weekday. And we went down there and looked, and there was nothing going on down there. There was nobody living there. A lot of the businesses were boarded up. It was just not an area that it looked like it would be very attractive to start a market. So we said, come back to us. We saw the plans. They had all the plans on the drawing board, but it wasn't there yet. So our market started there in 2003, and the great thing about the bid is they have these, they're called SAMs, service and maintenance guys, and they're there putting out signage, cleaning up the street, serving as ambassadors on the street, so they're handing out materials to people coming by, people that live in the neighborhood. So they're wonderful people to have for us down there. They put out our signage. They actually give us a small grant each year to do market promotions and our chef demo programs. So they're really important people. We do a weekly e-news, which we'll talk about at some point, but they take a section of the news about that market and send it out to their list so that it goes out to all the community there. So they're a very strong business partner for us. The Main Street programs, when they started doing Main Street programs in Washington, D.C., there are sections of the city that were targeted for Main Street programs. And they are all volunteer staff, but they're right on the ground in the communities. So those people are really good foot soldiers for farmers markets to get out, be handing out your flyers, passing out information, being at market, introducing people to the market. Really strong partners. George Washington University is right at the site of our Foggy Bottom Market. And students are very interested now in what they're serving in the cafeteria, humane treatment of animals. They're trying to understand where food comes from and all that kind of stuff. So they end up being very good partners with us. The medical center is actually right next to GW University and where our site is. And one of our staff was very creative in getting them at the medical center to put our farmers market card on their screensaver for the hospital. So every time they popped up the screensavers for the hospital, there's farmers market open every Wednesday down there at Foggy Bottom. So, there are ways to get into these institutions that can help you promote the market without any cost at all, really, just finding the right connection. Silver Spring Regional Center we love because it's downtown Silver Spring. There was an existing market there. In 2004, they talked to us about starting a new market in the new downtown area, which is like a pedestrian mall that they close off on the weekends. And very smartly, this regional center does not charge for parking on Saturdays when we have the market. So parking is free. It's also covered, so people come down. It's in a shopping area, so you can buy shoes from DSW. You can go to Borders. You can go to a restaurant. But our farmers market is right there on the pedestrian plaza. And the developer who owns this shopping mall area says we're the only one of his that he owns in the country that they have a positive increase in sales for all the businesses, and it's because the farmers market is down there on Saturday. So what you're doing is finding a partner that's interested in bringing some more vibrancy to the community and helping with marketing materials, making sure that your site is set up and closed off, providing some staff that can help you. They actually pick up and deliver and return to storage all of our market equipment. It's like a great market.
For business partners like that, it can be really important to provide them with actual economic statistics. And these exist. People like Market Umbrella can collect this information. We did a survey in Asheville, and we surveyed some of our market goers back in 2000, 2003, and 2004. And we asked them, and we did this in rural markets and in Asheville and in another smaller town, is coming to market the main reason you came to town today? And then second, we asked them, are you planning to do other shopping while you're in town, and how much more do you think you'll spend? And so then, based on our visitor counts, we were able to extrapolate out how much dollar value was coming to that business district, and therefore any kind of competing business, and this comes up with citing markets. Someone will say, well, I have a flower shop. You can put a market in my neighborhood as long as there's no one selling flowers. This is a true story. And it might often take that kind of sharing of economic data as to, hey, this is how markets bring customers to you that you wouldn't have had already, for them to understand and want to engage in that partnership. One other partner I want to mention that's really important for a lot of the rural markets I work with are the county-level agricultural cooperative extension agents. A lot of those play a really key role in those rural markets. For example, I think in the operations section you're going to talk about farm visits. There are markets for whom the extension agent visits every farm applying to vend at the market, or vouches for the fact that they've already been there and grows what that producer says they grew. And that's very helpful. That saves the market manager a lot of time. That's a key partnership. And they help spread the word, and maybe some farms that are hesitant to get into this direct marketing thing, that agent might talk to them and say, well, it's working for them. You could take an acre and do this. And they become an ally, I think, for the market at that point. So there's a lot of other partners I could talk about, but I think we spent enough time on this particular slide. How many people, I'm looking over there at that chart you filled in, how many years has your market been operating continuously? Yes, thank you. And there's very few people in the startup phase. Are there people who didn't fill that out who are looking for a site or a place for their market? Okay, there's about 2. So I'm not really going to spend any time on this. My card's here. I'd be happy to talk to people individually later. But I had a whole talk I was going to give on where to site the market, and a couple slides about that that I'm going to bypass for now. And I apologize to you who are trying to site a market. Happy to talk to you during a break. I'll just say this. In a viable community for a market, I think a mediocre location can be overcome. And I just say that from experience and from what I see. You want a great location. And every location has its downsides. And hopefully you can find a great location. But I'm just shocked at how, for example, this market, the North Asheville Tailgate Market, which is one of the ones in our association, before it moved 3 years ago, it was in the dirty, greasy back parking lot of a pizza place that you cannot see from the road. And there were thousands of people there every Saturday morning. And so I'll just say this. You want the best location you can find, but that a bad vendor mix, destructive or absent management, these things will sink a market a lot faster than the location will. And it may be that if your location isn't good, you need more money in your marketing plan to get the people out there. Location's important. I've incredibly seen bad locations work. Do I want to say anything here? I think I do. Because a lot of markets, they get going for a few years, and then they think, we're going to build a structure. And others of our co-presenters from today can jump in on this point, but my sense is that there's a growing consensus that indoor farmers markets do not work that well. And those who have invested a lot of money in building a structure for an indoor market, a lot of them have been disappointed. And by indoors, I mean 4 walls and a roof and artificial lighting and, you know, we're warm and dry every day of the year kind of thing. A structure's great. I like a roof with poles. We don't have one at our market. There are days when we certainly wish we had a roof with poles. These guys at Carborough and Durham do have a roof with poles, I think. Yes, some vendors under and some not. And that's great. And I think the reason is a lot of what this is about is the experience of that open air shopping. And there are elements of that feeling that we're outside together as a community meeting people that you lose when you go inside. So if you or your board are having these dreams of we're going to build this building, also the economics of that are difficult. Partnerships, I think, need to come in on that too. Because to build a building just to do something in it 1 or 2 days a week, yeah, you might be able to pull in a lot of grant funding, but are you really going to be able to support the maintenance and the rebuilding of that building when you need a new one in 40 years with the revenues of a market? It might be building something that's too big for the purpose. And there's a question here, so let's get this gentleman a mic.
So is that true regardless of the socioeconomic status of the customer?
So,
and is basically our, I don't know, whatever we're talking about today, is it geared towards a certain socioeconomic status, educational status?
I think that as we continue talking, I've tried to recognize the fact, you know, I was talking to Les before the meeting this morning, and she's in northern Alabama in a very poor community, and the market has 10 vendors on a good day, and there are things that you can do in one of the top 15 metropolitan statistical areas in the United States, and that I can do in a town with some wealth that in you know, really the middle of a low wealth community without any wealth anywhere nearby are much harder to do. And I think we're going to try to recognize that in our presentation. There are going to be points where I talk a lot about how that might be different from one market to another. And I think you know, when I talk about you need a paid professional manager, well, I'm going to talk about that might not be possible, and here are some other things that work if you're not in that situation where either your community or your body of vendors can support that. So I think we're going to try to recognize that. I think the point about, you asked it at this particular moment, I think the point about building a structure or not, I think that what draws people to the market shopping experience does cross socioeconomic lines. And we can disagree, and that'd be interesting to discuss, but that's my opinion. And that advice about, you know, moving it indoors versus not. If I don't have much money and you move it indoors, it's that much easier for me to compare the prices with Walmart. I mean, that's another take on that, because it becomes more like Walmart, you know, because it's inside, it has walls, you know, so I don't know. I don't know that I would change that statement in particular. There was a hand over there and then in the front.
The only difference that we look at our market, because where we're economically challenged, is we don't have any crafts at all at this time. With our only 10 vendors, and it's, you know, people need the food. At this point, we have no craft vendors. Other than that, we operate our market just like any other market. You know, we just want people to spend their money on food.
Yep.
We partnered with our local fairgrounds, which happened to be located in the city that the market was in. We were in a parking lot, and it became very dangerous in the downtown area, space-wise. We almost ran over a couple people.
Yeah.
So we had this opportunity, and the fairgrounds had put up what's called a cattle pavilion, and it will hold at least 40 to 50 vendors under roof. And that really has been a terrific advantage, to be under roof, but it's still open all the way around. You feel the breezes, and the rain will blow in a little bit around in some places. But having a roof overhead really has worked well, because people will come regardless if it's pouring. because they know once they get there they can be underneath that roof, but they're still outside.
Yes. Yeah, that's an interesting... I like to make this point about rain. You can put it inside, but people who don't like going out in the rain aren't going to go out anyway. I mean, that's the funny thing about spending a lot of money to build an indoor market. This point on the bottom in terms of outdoors, I think heat is an issue. And I'd be careful about how hot your outdoor location is, especially if it's an afternoon market. And in downtown areas, there can be wind tunnels, we found out with our holiday site this year. And so before you site your market somewhere downtown, where there are buildings that create these wind tunnels, I would make sure to go there on a windy day and check it out.
I'd like to add this whole idea of using the fairgrounds. I've worked with the New Zealand farmers markets now for 5 years, and most of their farmers markets are in what they call the fairgrounds. And so it's a really nice setting because it's usually not used for most of the year. So you do have that access to a building that is more open air than just an enclosed building. You've also got lots of parking, and they do some great signage, and they can do events. They've got picnic tables out there. And so in a small rural community, if you can find a location like that that makes sense, that can be a really good gathering point, that it's already done for you, basically. You're not investing in a building. You're using something that maybe doesn't get as much use as it normally would.
Let's make this the last question on this point, just because we have so much to cover this morning.
We agree with you about indoor spaces. It's very difficult to pay for money for that. In New Orleans, we have, and in Baton Rouge as well, our outdoor market is in a parking lot. We partner with an organization, a company actually, that gives us a space, coffee company. And they have an indoor parking garage that they have fixed up a bit for us. And on really torrential, tropical, rainy days, we go in that parking lot, which is attached to our parking lot, right next to it. And so, we do think we're there, rain or shine, but of course in the south, in the tropics, we have to be very careful about rain. So it helps us to do, we really positioned it there for that reason. We saw the parking lot for lots of reasons, and we saw that they had an attached garage, and we thought, well, maybe they'll let us use that on rainy days, and they have. And in Baton Rouge, Red Stick Market actually does the same thing. They have a Main Street market where they can go inside on really quite terrible days, but still the market is in the same location.
Great. Thanks. Here's another essential question that even if you're further along, you can pause and ask yourself. What farmer base am I trying to serve, and what customer base am I trying to serve? And here's a little bit of what I mean by that. This is a picture from the Yancey County Farmers Market. This one is in a rural county. The whole county has less than 10,000 people near Mount Mitchell, Burnsville, North Carolina. And they've been in existence about 5 years. And at some point about 3 years in, they looked around and they realized, well, here we are in this mountain North Carolina community, and the people coming to our market are the retirees and the people with second homes. And that's okay, but the 10,000 people who live here are not coming to our market. And what should we do differently? How has our marketing plan been wrong? How is our product mix wrong? How is our vendor mix wrong for this group? And I don't only want to reach this group because of food access, but also these are customers for these farmers. And so they took that step back at that point. I would encourage you, wherever you are, to make sure you're looking around and saying, who is my customer base? Are they who I want them to be? And how can I serve them differently or better if that's my wish? Here are some more points about, wrong way. There we go. Whoop. How about just that? Are commercial or conventional growers part of the mix? An essential early on question. In some places like Asheville, and maybe most places aren't like this, the customers assume that all of the vendors are using organic practices or the equivalent to organic practices, even if they're not certified. It might not be like that where you are, but where we are, there's a lot of that assumption. And so a lot of the markets have to think and define themselves when that conventional grower comes along, are they going to be part of this market or not? Define your geographic reach for vendors. And this is where I want to make an argument. A lot of people with rural markets, there's an economic development aspect, and somebody's arguing for, we only want to let vendors in from this county. We're very sort of provincial about our counties in North Carolina. And in general, I think you help the economic development of this county more by letting in vendors from other counties. I actually think making a restrictive rule like that hurts the market more than it helps it. Now, you can still make little special rules to offer preference. You know, if two vendors are trying to sell the same product and we only have room for one vendor with that product, we're going to have a preference for X. But I think especially if you're in an environment where it's hard to find vendors, which I know in rural areas, that's one of the hardest parts of starting markets is finding enough vendors. The customers want variety, they want quality, they want a good selection. And by letting people come in from a little further away and creating that experience for your customers, that's going to help farmers who are near that market to look at it and say, hey, this is something successful that's building here. I'm going to start growing for this. I'm going to want to be a part of this, and that economic development will happen. What I see is the markets that start in a very restrictive way never build into something that creates that. And so that's my little rant on that point in terms of what vendor base you're serving. This woman in the brown sweater had a question.
You've hit upon an issue, and it's one of the main reasons I'm here today. Yes. We have a market in South Georgia, and we're trying to promote ourselves as a regional market. There are 7 counties, and it's a very rural area. And what we would hope is that as these counties are participating with us, and we are growing, we'll go into our 3rd year, is that we can partner, and I spoke with these young ladies about this, with our other counties and encourage them to have markets on alternate days so that eventually we'll have a market in South Georgia every day of the week. Is this realistic?
No, I think it is. I think that's a really good way to be looking at the region that was serving all these different constituencies. And I agree totally with Peter that when you start restricting your region, you're limiting product and you're also limiting the creativity of the farmers, because when they see that there are some gaps in the market, they're either going to start growing or they know somebody else they can grow for the market. And I think that's really important, really key.
Thanks. And I'm just observing that there's a couple people who look cold to me. I don't know if we should address that. Anyone cold, raise your hand. Okay. Yes, 3 or 4. So I don't know. Yes, thanks. And I think that model that you just described is important. There are now more than, what's the number, 20,000 farms in the United States that rely solely on farmers markets for their income. Is that right, Stacy? Do you know that statistic? The USDA has done that statistic for a while. Well, I think that's the number. That's the number from then. And, you know, I do business planning with farmers. That's a big part of my job is I crunch numbers with them and do budgets and that sort of thing. And I can tell you, you know, farms that rely on direct marketing are not making a living from just doing one market a week. They're piecing it together in several different ways. Maybe markets aren't the only way. Maybe they have a subscription program. Maybe they have a roadside stand. Maybe they do some wholesaling. But maybe they're doing 3 or 4 or 5 markets. These are all different models that farms use. But you're absolutely right. It's often easier to recruit farmers into direct marketing if there are 3 markets to go to instead of 1 market to go to. Another point here is home gardeners and hobbyists that I want to raise. This is something that I've seen become an issue at many markets. One of the things that causes markets to collapse is a price race to the bottom. And one of the things that makes a price race to the bottom happen, and there are other ways to control this or help with it, shorter price fixing, but one of the things that makes it happen is a lack of awareness or discussion about the impact of sort of home gardeners and hobbyists who show up often as a social thing and are willing to charge as little as they possibly can because they're largely just there for fun. And so one of the things I've seen sometimes in market rules is not a rule saying you have to charge this because that's illegal, but a guideline that says please be aware that there are people at this market trying to make a living in farming and that prices should reflect the realities of those growers. It's a difficult question. I think home gardeners and hobbyists can add a lot. You know, there can be the guy or gal with the heirloom pear orchard in their backyard who's just crazy about that and brings, 10 fantastic kinds of pears and has this level of maniacal detail to his pears that probably no farmer would ever have, and that is a great addition to your market. But be careful about pricing, and again, this might be something that you sit down and think, who is this market for? And in our case, it's really about, because it's our mission as an organization, supporting working farms. And so we're careful about those lines between those different kinds of vendors.
Mike, could I say something here?
Please do, Cliff.
I'm maybe one of the only farmers in the room, and we're going through that right now in Smithfield, Virginia. We had a market that will do $10,000 every Saturday morning. 8 vendors, 4 farmers, 4 bakers. This past year, because of the economy, the downturn in it, we ended up with 30 vendors. Now we had to share this $10,000 with 22 other vendors, and most of them were large gardeners. But they were politically in tune, and the market manager did not know how to say no. We're facing this right now. I don't know what our future will be for that location next year, but the amount of work that myself as a farmer puts in, my daughter actually sells at that market, and she is very, very, very disenchanted and is talking about not going back. I sell at 2 other markets, so I don't have that problem right now, and I hope it doesn't exist over there. But that's something as market managers I really hope you take a look at, and not let the I call professional gardeners or large local gardeners come in after everything. They have 10 watermelons, 15, 20 pounds of tomatoes, and I'll give you a prime example. I sell my tomatoes year-round, $2 a pound. They'll come in and sell theirs at 50 cents a pound. Well, I'm not going to sell any of my tomatoes hardly until those small gardeners sell out. Nothing against them, but that's not if you want to sustain a farmer's market, that's not a way to keep growing.
And this is an argument for fees. There's a few different arguments for fees, but and again, fees are not the same in a poorer rural community as they are in downtown Asheville. But what I found is where the fees are reasonably significant, you won't get as many. People will sort themselves out in this way. You won't get as many hobbyists there just for fun, willing to charge as little as possible. You'll get people, even if they are, and a lot of the tradition in the mountains and in the South is people do, just because someone has a big garden and the economy's low and they're trying to piece together some income, that could be a valid household income. And from a job creation, community development perspective, I'm not poo-pooing the idea that members of your community are going to try to grow a big garden on the side and come to market and make some income. That could be an okay economic development strategy, but I think one of the things that fees do, setting a decent fee at market, is to get those people to think of it a little more as a business and set their prices accordingly, rather than thinking, well, it's more or less free for me to stand here, so I might as well just set really low prices so I'm sure to sell out. We're going to move on to legal structure. Every topic here is a can of worms that we could spend half an hour on, and that's the nature of farmers markets, as you know well probably if you have any involvement at all. And so I'm just going to keep pushing the agenda and moving it on, even when it feels like there's 100 more things that we could say on that subject. So what's the market's legal structure? Here I think we're going to go into more detail, but I think there are 4 basic categories of legal structure. No formal legal structure. The market being an umbrella under another organization. The market having a nonprofit status, or the market being a for-profit business. And I've seen examples of all 4. And I'm going to talk through those a little, and then we're going to zero in on the nonprofits, and other people other than me are going to talk. And so here's a market with no structure. It's been there for more than 10 years. This is a chef demonstration at that market. Essentially, the only structure that this market has is there's a little government form called a SS4, which you can send in to get a tax ID number for banking purposes only. And so this is the little thing that markets with no legal structure do, so that at least they can have a bank account that isn't in somebody's name or something other than, well, this market that this chef whose picture was taken at, Until about 3 years ago, they had a coffee can instead of a bank account, but then they went and got that tax ID number to open a bank account, and now they have a bank account, and that's great. There's certainly less administrative time and overhead involved in having no structure, right? You can still do banking, as I just pointed out. One thing that surprised me, but if I hadn't seen it happen 4 times in Western North Carolina, I wouldn't have thought you could. But you can still buy insurance. As essentially an unincorporated entity, an insurance agent will still sell you insurance. And so, at least in North Carolina, they will. Here are some cons to having no structure. It's hard to apply for outside funding. Just think about it. If I'm the Farmers Market Promotion Program, a federal government agency giving out grants that average $50,000, am I going to be comfortable giving $50,000 to a group of people who have, no formal board, no formal legal structure? Those people could walk away and disappear tomorrow and they wouldn't be accountable to anything. Probably not. So there's a con of having no structure. And the other thing I'd say is that having structures forces you to think through some important issues. Develop leadership. Make rules and regulations. Have meetings. And so while there are some markets I know that do very well without a formal structure because they've figured out over the years that they have to do those things anyway if they're going to succeed, becoming a formal nonprofit is a way to force yourself to do those kinds of things. Here's the other thing about having no structure. I hate standing in one place. Markets like this often emerge because there's some really highly motivated, go-get-em kind of people who are motivated and they go do it. They're volunteers. They're driven. And these markets with no structure that I see, this is their strength and weakness. They have this tight insider group that has created something beautiful, but maybe next year, what's going to happen when that group isn't there anymore? And I guess that's the other thing that a structure does. And here I'm talking to the small rural markets here that might hesitate to get too structured or to go out on their own. When you're ready, I think it's a really smart thing to create a structure because in creating a nonprofit, you're forced to create a board, to have some financial oversight, to be audited, to have all these things that kind of guarantee the continuation of this market after those key core people move on. And it creates something bigger than you. And I think that can be a good thing. So there's my little rant on that. Umbrellaing under another organization. This is how the Asheville City Markets run. Our organization launched this market. Upon launching it, we said to the farmer group, you can choose to continue under our organization for as long as you want, but you can also form your own organization whenever you're ready. And that's how we started that market. And to date, every time this comes up in conversation, everyone kind of looks around the table and says, do you see any reason to go out on our own? Not yet. They're seeing all the benefits of being under our organization. We already have a bookkeeper. We already have a person answering the phone from 9 to 5. These things make it very nice for the market. You don't have to build those things yourself. And I have some cons up here too. This can lead to an over-reliance on the other organization's ability to fund itself, right? So if our organization goes broke, we have a lean year. The grant environment gets tighter. We depend on grants to be able to have that office. Maybe the market then doesn't have the level of support it once did. In some cases, the other organization is a site provider. In this case, it's a grocery store. So there's a grocery store in Asheville that has markets on its property, and it provides some of the basic structural support for the market running. There are still sort of it tries to recruit vendor leaders each year and make sure that that key person is identified, but the grocery store is providing that basic level of placing a few ads, providing the space, carrying the insurance, that sort of thing. So sometimes that's the umbrella organization.
To add, in the D.C. area, Whole Foods decided that they wanted to add farmers markets to their sites, to the grocery store. The problem is they didn't do any of the marketing. They didn't provide anything. They just wanted to say that they were supporting local farmers markets. It wasn't a very win-win for the farmers.
Yep. So be careful about who the organization is. Creating your own organization, it's a lot of work. I've done, and this is beyond farmers markets, I've done a lot of counseling people against starting nonprofit organizations over the years, maybe because I live in a place where people are kind of addicted to it. I think we have more per capita than anywhere in the United States. Nonprofit organizations, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work just to keep the organization running. It's work beyond actually running the market, running the organization. So think about that. You know, I like the idea of making sure something's really going to fly before you start a formal organization, go through the IRS filings and all that sort of thing, and making sure you have the right people on board. You might be creating a monster that wasn't ready to be created. And at this point, I'm going to direct you to this handout in your packet, which looks like this. It's a grid. And the reason this handout exists is a very specific reason. It used to be that a farmer's market could go to the IRS and say, I want to be a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which is the type of organization that can receive tax-deductible donations. So it's the one that you probably most want to be as a nonprofit organization. And the IRS would say yes. At this point, the IRS does not always say yes. And here's the reason. They see markets. If all you tell them is, I want to start a farmer's market and I want that to be a nonprofit organization, they say, well, the only reason that this thing is saying it wants to exist is to give these for-profit businesses, all these farmers and bakers and vendors, an advantage. And so essentially, we're creating this tax-free structure for all these for-profit businesses. And that's not what nonprofit status is for. If you think about it, the IRS needs an answer for, let's say I'm a real estate developer, and I have this beautiful downtown building where I could have 10 renters, right? Well, I'm doing a lot of what a market is doing. I'm creating economic opportunity for small businesses, right? I am creating a reason for people to come downtown or revitalize my community and neighborhood. Why can't I be a nonprofit like that farmer's market over there is? I'm doing the same thing they are. I'm just doing it with my property that I own. Okay? So the IRS needs an answer to that. And so I don't know a lot about all this, and I'm going to let other people talk in a moment. But the thing I do know is that if you are going to apply to be a 501c3 nonprofit to the IRS for running a farmer's market, you need to clearly make the case for a broader mission and for the market being one little part of how you execute that broader mission. In our case, our organization already existed for 15 years and had a clearly established broader mission to sustain the survival and thriving farms in our region. Boy, that was a terrible expression of our mission. It must be morning. So we didn't have to ask any questions or have anybody ask us any questions. It was clear to us that starting a market fit into that existing work. And, you know, it's only 5% of what we do. And so that was an easy case to make to the IRS. What the IRS is having trouble with is new 501c3 nonprofits that solely exist to operate a market. And with that, I'm going to let other people more knowledgeable about the 501c4, 5, 6, yada, yada, talk about this. This sheet was made by an intern at the Farmers Market Coalition. So did you want to talk, Stacy? Do you want a mic?
Briefly, and then I know Bernie has some experience to share with her 501c3. So we recently, the Farmers Market Coalition, I don't know how many of you get our newsletter, but we just put one out last week, and there was an article in there about 501c3 status, and it interviewed a series of farmers market managers that had either attempted and been denied or were successful. So, and one thing that you'll find on your on the thumb drives that you should all have is a sample 501c3 application that was successful from the Webb City Farmers Market. Now, there are many other successful 501c3 applications. That's just an example that market was generous enough to share. But this grid will go through some of of course, the 501c3 to the left, and then there's other 501cs. There are actually up to 27 501cs, actually, which is a fun fact that I only recently learned. And these other ones are the most common ones that if the IRS person who's reviewing your 501c3 application happens to have that perspective that Peter just shared, well, how could I justify giving this farmer's market 501c3 status when really all they're doing is the same concept as a real estate developer? If the application is worded in such a way that there could be an easy parallel. Some of these other ones, C4, C5, C6s, are what that IRS reviewer might suggest that, well, I don't think you qualify for a C3. I think your organization is actually more apt as a 501c6 or 4 or 5. So this will give you a little bit of a window into what those different ones are. From what I've learned, if you are denied a 501c3, that doesn't mean you can't go back and appeal, review your application again, and make a case. I know a lot of organizations, both individual farmers markets and statewide farmers market associations, that they got a lot of questions from the IRS after their first application. They put together a good response, and then they were awarded their C3. So if you come up against a wall, don't necessarily be deterred and never go back again. Alternatively, depending on your mission, you may actually want to end up being a trade association or something that does have the farmer's profitability as at its core. And if that is your core, then you might not want to waste your time trying to window dress it up so that it gets 501c3 status. As Peter said, you really need to have a broader mission that the farmers market itself is just one communication outreach strategy that also has that side effect of supporting a local agricultural survival, or I'm butchering it also. But there are lots of sample mission statements out there. It pays to go look at some of these markets and look at what their mission statements are, and consider those as you're developing it, if you do want to pursue any of the 501c statuses. And now, Bernie, I know your markets have been 501c3 from the beginning.
Not actually from the beginning. We started out under the umbrella of American Farmland Trust, so we were one of those organizations that was a program of a national nonprofit. And when they decided in 2002 that our program wasn't a fit, I'd already been there 12 years, and I said, let us figure out how we can take our program and turn it into its own separate 501c3. And so that's what we worked at doing. And one of the reminders to you is IRS is set up to collect taxes. They don't want all these people coming to them with these great ideas saying we should be tax-free. So you're going to have to really make the case. And so in 2002, we'd already been doing the farmers market since 1997. We already had programs established at the market. Our chef programs, our other demonstration programs. We'd started a school program where we're working with kids about local food. So we had a lot of materials. And so we decided to go the 501c3 route. The first thing you do is you have to incorporate. We incorporated in the District of Columbia so that you can start having a business number and identification. And then you need to file the paperwork for the nonprofit status. And we're very fortunate that we found an attorney who was willing to work with us on a very low fee. I mean, I know some other nonprofits find attorneys that will do it pro bono because they just really believe in the organization. But it's a huge application that you have to file to prove. You have to show your incorporation, your bylaws, your board, and the board originally doesn't have to be much, but it has to be a president, a treasurer, and a secretary, usually 3 people. The president cannot be the treasurer, so you have to separate those entities to begin with. But you can start out pretty small like that. The issue is the IRS is going to be very scrutinous to say, are you doing educational and charitable activities, and really press you on those points to see that you are doing those activities. So that's really the first pass at that. And the application to be a 501c3 is $500 in addition to going through all the legal stuff. It took us a year, and Peter mentioned that he saw nonprofits just apply, or farmers markets just apply and get nonprofit status. That wasn't happening when we filed in 2002. A lot more scrutiny, a lot more. You're just doing a business activity there. Why should we give you a nonprofit status for a farmer's market? I mean, they don't see farmers as a disadvantaged class. We tried to make that argument, but they don't see that because they know that they're making money at the market. So it's really the charitable and the educational activities that you need to have in order to qualify to be a 501c3. Like I said, it took us a year to get the status, and then what happens is after 5 years of being a nonprofit, you get an additional review from the IRS, and what they want to see is that you have not your charitable educational. They figured you're already doing that. They want to see that you have a diversity of funding. They want to see that you're not just funded from the fees for the farmers markets. They want to see that you have multiple funding sources. So that's sort of another test that you have to go through after you've been in existence for 5 years. But we knew as an organization, having been part of a national nonprofit, that we could raise grant money, for our programs. We could also go out to community organizations and have grant money, and that we wanted to be able, as Peter mentioned, going out and applying for those USDA or farmers market promotion grants and stuff like that. We wanted to be able to have the ability to do that and use it for our program activities. So that was the reason that we tried that. Other organizations, as they say, Stacy said, you can be a C4, C5, C6. I mean, some are set up that the market is a different kind of entity, and the Friends of the Market are set up as a nonprofit organization, and they exist solely to fund the activities of the farmers market. I know that's how the Santa Fe farmers market is set up. I think they're just a business entity, the market, but the Friends of the Market is a nonprofit group that basically provides funding for all the program activities that go on. So you can have sort of a combination of things that go on with your status, but if you set up a 501c3, just like any sort of formal structure, you're going to have a board, you're going to have regular meetings, you're going to have minutes. An audit is actually not required unless you're over sort of the $250,000 limit for your organization. We do an audit annually because we're in multiple states and we have farmers from multiple, and we just feel that it's a good thing to do, have somebody else look at the books and do it. So when foundations look at our financial record, we can also say, here's the audit that we've had for the year. So it's not free. You're not probably going to find anybody to do your audit for free, but you can find people that will be willing to work with you on the cost of doing that. So I think that's a really important thing. And I saw some hands with questions. So
I was just going to say, you basically covered it, Bernie, but at the Carborough Farmers Market, we had filed about 10 years ago as a 501c3. We had a pro bono attorney helping us and a CPA. However, they guided us in the wrong direction. So we've been filing as a nonprofit 501c3 when, in fact, we were not a nonprofit for the same reasons Peter was mentioning. Our farmers were making a profit. And so then we had to switch to a 501c6, and what we've done is what you mentioned, and we're breaking off and doing a Friends of the Carborough Farmers Market that can do our educational and charitable events, and then keep our 501c6 for our farmers to make a profit and have that as a separate organization so that we can grow in other ways. So.
The key thing we've seen, because there are a lot of markets that are starting up in our region, and some of them are small, some of them are in city areas, we share our information. They come in and look at our nonprofit application and ask us a lot of questions. That we want to see other organizations be 501c3s because we do think it's an important activity that you're doing, especially the education component is very key.
One thing to clarify about filing for nonprofits, it's if your budget's under $10,000, it's one fee. I think it's $300. If it's going to ever be over $10,000, it's $750 for the. $50,000 is sort of the threshold limit for audit. No, for the application. So if you're thinking about starting a 501c3 nonprofit, the IRS application. if your market is never going to bring in more than 10,000, it's 300 and over. It's just the application process.
It's just the you have to show the IRS 3 years of a budget outstanding there. The fee is $500 set. Doesn't it has changed? Okay. Okay, and so how much did you pay? $750. $750? Oh, wow, okay. A little more costly. It cost nothing for us to incorporate in D.C., and then it was a $500 charge. But again, this was 2002, so I'm not surprised that they found a way to get some more money out of people.
As a nonprofit with the state before you file your 501c3, but you've got 27 months to put that application in. So that's the other thing, that if you're under another organization and looking to be independent, when you file your own paperwork, being prepared to follow up in 27 months with a nonprofit application to the IRS.
Yeah, there's a time deadline. It's usually that 27 months.
Can you all talk about the availability for grants for the non-501c3 statuses? For the availability for granting, if you're not a 501c3, if you choose one of these other 501c statuses, what the possibilities are for that, or if the having a friends of is the only way to go about it?
I think it's pretty limited. Yeah, I think most funders need you to be a 501c3.
Yeah. Because they can't take the tax deduction for giving you the grant. They cannot do it unless you're a 501c3. And that's for them the purpose. Same thing with individual memberships. They can't take the tax deductibility for it.
Sometimes there's local grants.
This is another reason why it's so wonderful to go under the umbrella of an organization that already is a 501c, such as a Main Street program, or a Convention and Visitors Bureau, or a university that's taking you on. So.
I'll tell you, when we left American Farmland Trust, we lost the person that did all the administrative work, all of the stuff that we as an organization had to take on. I never knew how to use Excel or a payroll program and stuff. That's what I had to learn because there were only 2 people. We had to run markets, we had to do programs, and then we had to figure out how to do all the administrative work. So guess what? It's a big, fast learning curve. So, yeah, having that umbrella can be really helpful to the organization, really helpful.
Bernie, let's get this woman over here in the green polar fleece, and then we'll move on.
I need some skates.
We just applied for 501c3 status, and actually it went up another $100. I think it's $850 now, as of 2010. But anyway, I would just wanted to see if you could speak a little bit more about separating the friends of the market, because I'm afraid we're going to be denied for the reasons you've talked about. But we are doing a lot of educational things, and so I want to understand a little bit more how. So you just start another organization as the Friends of the Market?
Basically, just like what Bernie said, they're looking for it to be charitable and educational. Those are the 2 things that you can.
So you just start a whole nother.
So, right, what they're looking. This is what's been tricky with our learning process. Food stamp machine, for example. If you want to apply for a food stamp machine at your market, you have to prove, and there are ways to prove this, but you have to prove that there's a greater benefit than just financial benefit. It can't be just a profit for your farmers. There has to be a greater added benefit. And if that's that you're working with 3 sister markets and to where you're going to implement that machine that Friends is going to take on, or if it's going to be that machine has a greater community benefit because of how it's, you have to prove that. So basically what they're looking for is, it can't just be about your market. They can't just be this is a group that's going to do, it has to basically be charitable and educational events for the market, not ways to increase profit for your farmers. That is a latent effect of the charitable and educational events. So basically, it's all about how you frame it. As long as your activities are cooking demos, seed saving workshops, working on that vein, or going into classrooms and taking it outside the market, Those are great things Friends can do. Friends cannot staff. You can't have Friends collecting money. Friends has to be a separate organization that comes in and does charitable and educational events. And as long as you frame it in that way, it should be. Yes. You can have three, usually most members say you can have 3 board members that are shared between your board of directors in your market and the Friends board, but you have to have 4, the majority has to be separate. Usually if it's a board member 7, 4 are separate, 3 can be your market members. It has to be separate. You have to have separate bank accounts because I'm assuming if you're starting Friends, then your other group is not a nonprofit. Yours have to be 2 separate entities. That's very important. Just to add to that really quick.
North Carolina.
A couple markets you might want to check out that have had Friends organizations for a while are the Dane County Farmers Market in Madison and I think the St. Paul Farmers Market in Minnesota. They have Friends organizations that I believe have been around for a while, so you may want to follow up with them as well if you want to kind of scope it out.
If you just look to Dane County, and basically they have very broad mission statements. Yeah, exactly.
Stacey,
one thing, if you're not in tune with the Farmers Market Coalition, for a $25 membership, you have access to all those materials online that you can review. It's really a bargain, and it's a really good resource for someone like you that's looking at those options.
That's exactly what I was just going to ask. So people could join the coalition, and then they could call on you for further support, connections with other markets, if they have follow-up questions after the little bit we've covered today. Yep. Great. Okay. Thanks for that great input, Sarah and everybody. How will the market be managed? So a lot of different models I'm going to take you through here. This is the North Asheville Tailgate Market again. It's been there 28 years. It did not have a paid manager until it's 27 years into its existence. It was very successfully run by a rotating set of vendor managers who they would have 2 lead co-managers every year. They would have a membership committee, a promotions marketing committee, a market day kind of setup management committee. So essentially, they were well organized and were able to maintain this in spite of that sort of kind of shifting sands of different people and the risk in that. This is one that made it through 27 years in that situation. The Paul, who's there standing with the gift basket drawing, and that's something they've done their whole time they've been in existence, is every vendor contributes a product which they put on a table, and then people put in their name or their business card, and one is drawn to win that gift basket every market. And then they build a mailing list out of that and a phone list, and they actually split up that phone list between all the vendors, and the week before the market starts for the year, they call every person on their list personally to tell them that the market is going to start. This is how well organized this market is without a manager. So there's a national conversation which I think to some degree ignores limited resource rural markets that says you have to have a paid professional outside manager, and I can vouch for there's more risk in not having one, but it can work. And then what this market did is they brought in Paul, who's running the gift basket drawing here, for 5 hours a week. And he's a weak manager, and I say that with all deference to Paul and all the great things he does, but structurally he doesn't have really any decision-making power. He basically does what the vendors ask him to do that the vendors don't have time to do anymore, and helps make the market run more smoothly. And he was brought in with the support of vendor fees to do that at 5 hours a week, and he does a great job with it. So that's one sort of mixed model at a very vendor-strong, well-organized, long-term, non-managed market. On the other side, here's a little market that was actually at that grocery store, and hopefully the person in the foreground is not anybody's brother, because I'll just say that you'll get people, just because someone volunteers to take a leadership position doesn't mean they're good at it, or that they're fair, or that having a taste of power, no matter how limited, won't make them completely insane. So this market dissolved in its first year into fist fights and shouting matches on market day in front of customers because our wonderful volunteer vendor manager, I say our, but it was theirs. I was sort of watching this happen, and he was mad at me along with everybody else. Just completely undermined this market and destroyed it with his opinions about how things should be run and sort of an overbearing attitude and bad leadership. And so when I say things can happen really well without a paid professional outside manager, yes, they can. They can also happen really poorly without a paid professional outside manager. Here's the Henderson County Tailgate Market. It's been there more than 30 years. And this is also managed largely by rotating vendor management. However, it has strong support from a cooperative extension agent who sort of staffs that process. So there's another model for you. And this market works very well. People do a great job. There are some concerns about producer-only enforcement there. And we're going to talk more about that later, but that's one of the risks of not having an outside manager is if somebody suspects that somebody's breaking the rules, it's very easy to perceive that there's favoritism happening or for there actually to be favoritism happening or for, and this is part of why North Asheville brought in an outside person, there being nobody willing to stand up for that to that person who has a lot of seniority and say, what you're doing, I think, doesn't fit into our rules. And having a paid outside person helps you to do that. This is the Flat Rock Tailgate Market. It was started by a business owner of a art craft gallery that is located in front of this location. It also has vendor leaders, but most of the promotion and the structuring and the site management is done by this art craft gallery owner. And it runs very well. It has about 25 vendors now. It's very successful. And this person's skill in retail and promotion, I think, is of great benefit. And so there's another model for you. Here's the Asheville City Market, whose manager is over here, and we'll talk later in the day. And when ASAP started a market, yes. Yes. So this is the Asheville City Market. We started this market. It was the first market in our region that had a significant fee because we had to pay for a manager. And there was, I'll talk about this later, we'll talk about fees, and I think we only have half an hour or so left, so there's a lot to cover, but hopefully we'll talk about fees. But that was one of the barriers for us, is nobody was paying more than $40 a year within 50 miles of where we sat. And so the idea that there was going to be a weekly fee to support an outside paid professional manager and a significant marketing budget was new. And we had to sell that idea. And having it be a farmer-led process helped sell that idea because we had a set of farmers, one of whose booth is here, who were willing to be advocates for that. But the paid professional outside management, I think, is the best model where it is possible. It has the lowest risk. It has the ability to have somebody who's perceived as fair and having all the vendors' interests in mind equally. I'm going to have more about this in a minute, but I'd say you can do more with this model. This is our grand opening day at the Asheville City Market, and that's the mayor cutting the ribbon. Asheville's outstanding teen there, and a couple of our county commissioners. And, having things like this happen and go off well and have the media there and all that, a lot easier when someone really has time to work on that sort of thing. And having a paid outside manager helped us do that. And there's Mike. Yeah, he really wanted everybody to see that picture. You know, doing events like having a professional photographer there and have your picture taken with the rain goat at Christmas time. You know, these things take a lot of planning and to figure out, and having a paid professional outside manager. Vendors don't have time for that necessarily. Again, the middle picture, why do I have that one there? Yeah, I don't know what that is. I know. I wanted to make a point about winter. You know, most of the markets in our region would tend to peter out as you went into November and December. They'd have a gradual attrition. The produce vendors who really didn't feel it was worth being there anymore stopped coming. The other vendors would slowly trickle away, and the market would gradually die by attrition. That was our leading model for markets as we went toward the holidays. Having a paid professional manager who had time to really rebuild the market into something different as we approach the holiday season. Vendor-managed markets have had a hard time finding the time to do that. This is the Kids Corner Market. We partner with a different community organization every week to bring in a kids activity so that parents can feel like they can come shop with their children and have them have something to do. In this case, they're making paper out of vegetables. This kind of thing, a lot of coordination. Again, you can just do more with more hands on deck, but you need to find a way to pay for those hands on deck, or you need an exceptional body of vendors willing to really stand up and spend their time in support of the market, like we had at North Asheville. Here's my little rant on this. Your competition, Walmart, Whole Foods, etc., is run and promoted by people with years of education and experience in business and marketing, and with huge budgets behind them to get the message out to the customers in your community. The least that your farmers and vendors deserve is skilled, creative management. I think it's worth every penny to them once they start to see how that works. And so let's let some of our co-presenters jump in on that if you'd like. Disagree with anything I just said, or just offer your own spin.
Actually, I'm going to talk about market management and the role of the market manager in the next session, so I will kind of skip. But I will say that there are markets in the D.C. area. Tacoma Park, which is totally farmer-run, has been from the very start. The Arlington Farmers Mart at Courthouse, which has been there also over 30 years, started out as a project of the Ag Extension. Ag Extension decided they didn't want to do it anymore. They lost the market guy who was doing it for them and decided not. So it's now under Parks and Rec. Parks and Rec doesn't really care about it, and they don't have an active farmer manager at the market on a weekly basis. And I'll tell you, the farmers that are in that market, because some of our same farmers are in that market, say, you know, it could be so much better here, but there is no active management. So whatever structure you have, whether it be a volunteer, a paid person, a community group, you need active management at the market. You need it, absolutely.
Yes, thank you. And, you know, I see this fallacy all the time. Businesses call our office wanting there to be a market at their location, and they think that they can just open the parking lot and let vendors show up and they'll have a farmer's market. And you won't have a farmer's market. You'll have something else. And so, yes, it needs active management. I think that's the key point. They're going to talk about the manager's role, but in terms of the foundations, the one thing I want to say is that the manager needs a foundation of certain rules and a certain level of power. And I personally, and this is just my take, am in favor of a structure where the manager has a little more power than maybe they give them at some markets. I think the manager should be able to make day-to-day decisions without having to have a vendor board tell them at every juncture what they need to do. And I think if the manager has that authority and then they continue to earn it by showing through their service to the vendors that they're doing a good job. And if they are earning it in that way by doing a good job, the vendors want the manager to have that power to make the decisions. They don't want to be involved except when the manager really wants their opinion and goes and seeks them out and says, hey, I need help with this one, guys. And then they go to the vendors and get that help. The other thing I want to say about this, and this is in my middle paragraph here, sometimes the majority of vendors want something, and that doesn't always mean it's best for the market. There's actually a tension between the customer's point of view and the vendor's point of view. And this will probably come up in your second session, so I won't dwell on it too much. But just to give one example, a simple one. Mike and I were meeting with some people from the West Asheville Tailgate Market, and they were asking some advice. And they were asking about how they set up and arrange the vendors. Vendors will always want to be as far away as possible from their competition, right? So if I'm a cheesemaker and there's another cheesemaker, they want that cheesemaker over there, all right? The customer would love to be able to see all the cheese right next to each other, compare varieties and prices. Okay, now I'm not saying one is absolutely right or wrong for markets. Don't listen to this as how you should set up your market. You know, grocery stores don't put cheese all over the store. There's a reason for that. You know, car dealerships all line up in one part of town. There's a reason for that, and it has to do with convenience for the customer and shopping mentality and that sort of thing. You know, and the other thing is, once there's one cheese vendor, and Bernie got into protectionism half an hour ago, you know, the vendors will always say, oh, that's my buddy over there who sells cheese, and if you, the manager, bring in another cheese vendor, her sales will go down. So, well, we can't do that. The customers want another cheese vendor. And for the good of the whole market to grow, the manager sometimes has to make decisions that the majority of vendors would actually have to disagree with. And that's a difficult balance. And we can talk, they're going to talk about that in the operations and integrity section. My fight here is about the rules. I think the foundation of your market should be based on having rules where whoever's in charge has enough authority to be able to tell a vendor who's breaking the rules, you got to stop breaking the rules, or to be able to make a difficult decision if a difficult decision has to be made. And that's my pitch in foundations, is get enough power in the right hands to be able to make those decisions. Otherwise, sort of things dissolve into infighting and anarchy. All right. Boy, this is one that I just copied off the outline that Stacy gave me. Do you want to say anything more about the board of directors and their role and how you work with them, Bernie?
Well, I think that when you're looking at a board of directors, ours is only can be up to 12 individuals, and actually, Anne, my co-partner on the founding of the market, we are both on the board. She's the president. I'm actually the secretary and treasurer. But what we look for in board members is that they are knowledgeable and very involved and interested in the whole local food movement in our region. Sometimes we look at somebody from a community where we're establishing markets, whether it be Annapolis or Baltimore, that we want that representation on the board. We're looking at other skills, whether they have some legal background. We love people with a business background, that they've done business management and have that. They bring that discipline to the organization. People with marketing and communications outreach skills, those are really critical to the organization. If you have someone on your board, you can assign them certain tasks for that. But mostly we're drawing people from the communities that the markets are in, because they're strong advocates for it. They're ears on the ground. They know the community. They can help you work with a city structure maybe that is not so cooperative in working with you on the market site kind of thing. So all those kinds of things. You want a resume from them, and you want them to be vetted by the board that you set up initially to make sure that they see that this is going to be a person that will be productive and serve. And usually the board terms are 1, 2, or 3 years. We also always have farmers on our board. So we have 12 board members. 3 of those board members are farmers. So, and we try to choose a variety from the vegetable production guy to meat producer or a baker or a cheese person. So we try to have a variety. And again, their terms are 1 to 2 years. Part of it is that a lot of the farmers can't spend a lot of time coming to board meetings. We only meet 4 times a year. So we try to make it as least intrusive to them as possible. Some can serve, and they like to serve multiple years. And we think that's a good thing. They're advocate among the farmers. So you need to find out what works for your organization.
Great. We got about 15 minutes, so I want to hit some things. Fees. Another foundational question, what are your fees going to be? One thing I'll say about fees is that they will always sound high when you try to set a high fee, but as soon as people are making good money, they will always be happy. And so there's a key point there. I think that in our starting the Asheville City Market, we were in an environment where there was massive resistance to the fees we were setting. And I have a handout that I think you all got, which was where do your vendor fees go? It's in your packet. It's got some blue boxes on it. And I thought that was a really pretty thing. I handed it out at a meeting. It says, for every $200 you earn at the market, you're going to keep 190 of it. And here's where the rest of it is going to go and what we're going to do with it. And, people still stood up in that meeting and yelled how, I'm going to be paying you $700 a year. That's highway robbery. But if the market is successful, which having a solid fee will help you make a successful market, then those who sat back and said, I'm not paying that, are going to come to you right quick. And so I'd say set the fee where it needs to be for the market to be successful, because there's no better deal in retail. A farmer can't get a prime retail space at that location for the money you're charging. I'm telling you. And so from a business point of view, set the fees where they need to be. They can be straight. We do a straight fee. Our fees at the Asheville City Market there's a $100 yearly fee if you want to be a member, and then it's $20 a week. That's by far the highest fee in our region. And that gives our market, with the number of vendors we have, about a $40,000 budget. It pays for a half-time market manager and a decent marketing budget, which often doesn't feel like enough, and then covers some operational costs. Our organization also has the support of a broader organization, too, that maybe reduces just Mike's costs straight. Percentage fees are considered a leading model by lots of people. Bernie has some great things she could say about that I'm not going to let her say due to time.
Next session.
Next session. And I understand all the arguments for it. We had a hard enough time selling our fees. The farmers I was working with, I think in the North Carolina mountains, people are as privacy-oriented as they are anywhere. And that's maybe our next step in 5 years. But in starting our market, there was great resistance to me having to tell you how much I made. Now, I understand the argument that once you're doing it, people feel proud. They trust the manager. They want to share that information. But in the startup, that was too hard of a one for us to sell. But I will say that's a leading model. Whoops, wrong way. A lot of our markets in our area have a yearly fee. I like a daily fee, however small. The Henderson County Tailgate Market, I helped convince them to go from no fee to $2 a market. $2 a market adds up to significant money for them. And, if you haven't stood there and made enough money to peel $2 off the back at the end of the day and give it to the manager, why are you standing there? And, so baby steps like that, can be worthwhile in a rural setting where people are resistant to the idea that they should be paying a daily fee. I think a daily fee is easier to pay as a first step than a yearly fee. At the beginning of the year, rural, low-wealth people might have trouble coming up with $50. But coming up with $2 at the end of the market day, that should be easy if the market has a customer or two. Here's the chart you have. All right, you got to define early on, is the market producer only, and what does that mean? You'll hear people talk about markets, and they'll really look down their noses at anything that isn't producer only. Here's why producer only is better, and then I'm going to talk about why I don't look down my nose. The excitement about the change of the seasons. There's a distinctive change of the seasons where you live. Producers work very hard to be first to market or last to market with the product. They should be able to get a price premium for that, as opposed to the price has been low because that's been coming from Florida forever. It's a level playing field for all working farms. You're not being undercut by farms from Argentina who can do it with a lower labor rate than you can. It favors fair pricing for locally distinctive items and avoids that kind of race to the bottom on prices. However, here's a couple things. One, I've been in places talking to farmers market groups where there were not enough growers there to launch a market. And there was not a grocery store within 50 miles. This goes back to my very early slide, what's the goal of your market? The goal of the market for this people was partly food access. And hey, let's develop growers who are growing a mix of things and selling direct and making a living on the farm. But maybe to get the customers, we've got to, I went to this meeting and they were talking about what produce distributor can we find to come set up at our market. Those of you who are really part of the producer-only religion are going to think that's crazy, but the more I listen to them, that was kind of their only first step. They needed to get food to rural people who couldn't find affordable fresh produce that was in any decent quality within 50 miles. They had, 2 growers who had the kind of production that they were ready to vend, and the other vendors weren't going to, the farmers who were growing 20 acres of tobacco weren't going to shift a bunch of that for something that didn't exist yet. So I saw the argument. Now, how they're going to get from there past those weaknesses of a non-producer only market to something strong in 10 or 20 years is maybe a struggle they have to work through. The other argument that I see is in Asheville we have something called the Western North Carolina Farmers Market that's run by the Department of Agriculture, and that's sort of a wholesale hub. And there's motion of food from all directions. We have independent produce companies in Asheville, many places don't have them anymore, who distribute to restaurants. And the existence of that market, which is not a producer-only market at all, helps these companies to exist. It creates a very important role in our local food system. So I think that's an interesting area of growth for regions that don't have that, sort of a local product exchange that's a mix of local and non-local products, a commercial hub for the movement of farm products that helps support your local food system. It's a different kind of model than the producer-only model that we all know and love from our neighborhood and rural farmers markets. But there's good things about it. So producer-only isn't the only way. If you're not constrained by some of these other things I'm talking about, it has really key advantages, and you're going to hear more about that operationally. Right. Here are some gray areas to watch out on. The reason I put these up front is if you put these in your rules early on, foundations, you're going to have less problems later on. So here are some gray areas. Who vends? So a lot of farms bring interns, like the young woman in this picture. What we like to avoid is, what we know we don't want is a farm hiring someone for $7 an hour and their only job is to stand at the farmer's market booth, because you lose that feel of you're meeting the producer. But in between that and the person whose hands were in the dirt being at the booth, there's some gray areas. So that might be something you have to define in your rules as you go forward with your market. How long has it been on the farm? This comes up with nursery plants, right? Because there's a lot of nursery plants, landscape plants, blueberry bushes. Nobody grows a blueberry bush from seed. So it was started somewhere else at some point. And how long has it been on the farm? What's your rule about that? That fist fight was about blueberry plants. Okay? So if you come up with rules, you might not have to have a fist fight down the road, and that's a good thing. This comes up with meat. At the Madison County Farmers and Artisans Market, just north of us, one of our member markets in the Tailgate Association, there was a farmer who was buying weaning age cows, beeves, from other producers, and then just taking them to the processor and selling that to market as sort of grass-fed veal. It was a cool product. People loved it. The customers liked it. But then they had to get into a big tussle over, does that meet our producer-only criteria or not? That farmer didn't raise that animal on their farm. And so the answer was no for that market. Doesn't necessarily mean the right answer would be no for your market. Maybe you'd like to have that product at your market. But defining that early on is going to help you. So think about those gray areas. What is craft? How much of the content must be modified by the producer? Okay? This particular person at the Big Ivy Tailgate Market raises the sheep and the Angora goats, shears the goats, cards the wool, spins the wool, dyes the wool, blah, 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 blah. That's clearly a craft. If she just dyed the wool, would that be enough of a craft for them to be at a producer-only market? I don't know, but these questions are going to come up. The more you can think about them up front, the easier your job is. This person, also at the Big Ivy Tailgate Market, has a little mill, and they grind flour and sell it to the customers. They don't grow the wheat. At your producer-only market, is that okay? Is it not? Customers love this. Is this breaking a rule? If then someone came along who did grow their wheat and wanted to do that, would you then put that vendor in this place instead of that vendor? I'm just saying define these things. And then how is it enforced, which these guys are going to talk about. Other key questions in the market design, rules, early rules, that, or if you're about to, you want to firm up your market, figure out these things. What are the insurance requirements of vendors and of the market organizing group? Okay. There's very few markets who actually require product liability insurance.
We do.
You do. And there are vendors who then have a really hard time getting it. And maybe you can talk about that later. What are the food safety requirements of vendors? Does the management enforce local food producer regulations or simply educate about them? Okay. I already talked about that. Funding models. How much does it cost to successfully run a once-weekly farmers market? Our example is $41,000 a year plus some hard-to-measure support from the umbrella organization. Shout out some numbers. What are your examples? 5,000 over there. About 40,000. Great. 22 to 25,000. 48,000.
30 to 40,000.
There's a growing consensus in this room, I'd say, within a range. You know, and our model is Mike is paid for 20 hours a week, and then he has a market assistant just on market day who's paid hourly, and then has some office support. And then we have a decent marketing budget. You know, we're in a crowded urban environment where we can't count on people finding us just from driving by. We need to let them know and remind them that we're there, and let them know of the special things we're doing. And then we also have to do special outreach, you know, print rack cards about our EBT program and all that sort of thing. Where will the money come from? Do markets need to self-sustain on vendor fees? Our goal is to self-sustain on vendor fees. I know in your presentation that's not your goal. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Well, actually, when Ann and I started the market, we thought we could sustain the market on fees from our producers. I don't use the word vendor. Okay. I think vendor has nothing to do with the product. I like producers better.
That's
but
great.
Anyhow, our producers, farmers. And what we found was that, first, one market isn't enough. But even with 9 markets that we have, I've done the numbers for the budget last year, and only 46% of our funding comes from the farmer fees. So it's typically 35 to 50% of our funding comes from the farmer fees. We do charge a percentage, 6% of sales. That's done on an honor system. I'll talk about that later. But that's not our only source of revenue. So we also raise foundation money. We have individual grants. And we do an annual event that is now in its 8th year. And it showcases all the local food and the farmers, has a silent auction, and that's grown from raising about $15,000 a year to last year we raised $230,000 from that event. It's got to be staffed and a lot of other things, but we have a variety of funding sources, and I wish the farmer fees would pay for all of it. We didn't have to do these other things, but it's just not possible.
Yeah, I guess how I would adapt my statement is our goal is to fund our core activities from our vendor fees, and then special kinds of outreach are sort of our food access programs. I think we'd always like to be seeking sponsorships and grants and other support for those kinds of things. Am I completely out of time, Matt?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. I'm actually in my last 3 slides, so I'm going to try to do those in these 2 minutes. I love business planning. If this were a whole workshop on business planning, that would be fun. For markets. It's not, and so I'm just going to hit a couple things that are sort of business planning exercises, standard sort of things that you learn in Entrepreneurship 101, and how I would apply them to markets. I have 2 marketing plan exercises for you. One is, in determining your marketing feel, a really good exercise for you to do with your board is to do an exercise like this where you try to define the unique position of your market in terms of how it feels to your customers and the kind of experience you want them to have here. Let me grab that. These things on the slide are kind of scales. So traditionally in marketing, there's a range from fun and playful on one side to elegant and refined on the other. Are you clearly one or the other? Are you trying to straddle that and be in the middle? You can straddle some things, but don't try to straddle everything, because a marketing approach that tries to be everything to all people will not work. It will not stand out. It will not seem distinctive. it's sort of business 101 that you don't do that. Is it trying to be soft and pleasant or strong and powerful, right? Is it more urban feel or more rural feel? Well, clearly farmers are rural, but it might be in an urban setting. Which are you emphasizing? Our Asheville City Market, and that's our first-year poster. The second-year poster has pretty pictures. In the first year, we really just wanted to focus on the branding and the awareness that we were there and that it was starting. That was a poster of a size that we just made for putting in community business windows. And you can see that we tried to straddle fun and elegant. We're more toward urban. We're more toward strong. We're more toward simplicity. And we're more toward new and modern as opposed to sort of the return to old times in our approach to our branding of our market. And if you compare different ways of branding, and neither one of these logos is better than the other, they're both perfectly good logos, but they have a completely different feel. And you can see that these two promoters have a different idea of what you would expect to find at the market, how you want your customers to feel about that market. I just want to say in marketing, too many people go to their graphic designer and all they have is sort of, oh, I'd like some tomatoes to be on there and I want it to be colorful. They haven't thought about these essential marketing issues of what's the experience I'm trying to communicate. Great exercise for you to do with your board, to sit down and think that through. And then you go to the designer and say, this is what we want, what you're designing to communicate. And a designer will love to have that kind of input from you. Okay. And so that's my first business planning exercise. My second one is to identify who are your customers. This is some analysis we did before the city market started. We identified one primary target market. Great exercise. I understand your market's for everybody. That's the first thing you're going to tell me when I start talking about that. But again, if you try to market to everybody, you don't have enough money for all those media placements. The way you reach tourists in your town is different from how you reach locals. The way you would communicate to seniors is different from the way you'd communicate to 25-year-old parents with kids. They're in different places. They're looking for different information. So you want to figure out a primary market and then some secondary markets. And then when you make your budget for how you're going to promote your market, instead of making some random choices, you look at, okay, of the markets I've identified, you work backwards from who you're trying to reach. Of the customers I've identified, which of those customers is this media placement or this press release or that public event or this partnership going to reach? You work from that, okay? And so we had tourists down here on the third level, and so that was not our priority for where to spend marketing money in the first year, even though we're in a really strong tourist town. And I'll just say, here's a little budget spreadsheet we did to analyze how much money different vendor fees would bring in based on assumptions about different numbers of vendors and our budget. And this Excel sheet, I think, is on your thumb drive. It's just a simple budget. It's sort of trying, it was us thinking through, and it's much taller than this. It went through, okay, $20 a week, $30 a week, 5%, 3%, $10 plus 4%, and it ran different numbers. Okay, what if we had 38 vendors, 50 vendors, 80 vendors, 100 vendors? Where would that put us in relation to our budget? And it allowed us to figure out, okay, you know, at 50 vendors, at $20 a week, we're at about $1,000 loss per month. Okay, this is before our annual membership fee. But at 80 vendors, we're at a gain. And so that's what that told us based on, you know, our particular set of expenses. So that's a simple budgeting sheet. I have lots of other different versions, and now Mike does too, of budgeting sheets. But this is something we did before the market opened that I want to share with you and put on your drive. It's very simple, but a lot of people don't like doing this kind of stuff. So I thought it'd be helpful to give you one. And so there's about 30 topics in an hour and a half. Yes?